Hi, I'm Traveling John, and I'm going to travel and sketch. Join me on the adventure. On our European adventure, we traveled from Denmark to the Netherlands, France, Catalonia, and then Italy, where we stayed alongside the beautiful Lake Como at Verona. Now we are moving on with a 2-day rail trip, first to Zurich, Switzerland for an overnight rest. Then early the next morning we hopped on the train to travel to Salzburg, Austria. We arrived in the late afternoon in Salzburg in time to find our lodging and a dinner. Here are some short video clips of the beautiful countryside we traveled through by train. The bells are going off and we're awake. I have my coffee. We're off for a good start today. And as you can see in the background, the castle. We hope to go up to that today. I'll be taking some photos around the city. I hope you can hear me, man. Those bells are pretty loud. But we enjoy them so much. There's so many churches here in Salzburg. And they're all around the river. So it makes some beautiful scenery. Thanks for tuning in to this Travel and Sketch adventure in Salzburg. In this case, there's going to be 2 parts. The first part will be my black and white sketch, and the next part of this vlog will be the color rendition. So I don't do that in every situation or every vlog, but in this case, this black and white sketch is rather detailed and takes a while. Plus I have a lot of great photographs and videos that I'd like to share with you. We visited many wonderful shops, restaurants, and also enjoyed the architecture and all the wonderful surroundings. My goodness, there's a beautiful river, the bridges, then you go over that and enjoy the little alleyways and cobblestone streets and the cliffs and those marvelous buildings that are built right underneath the cliffs. The monastery, the church, the apartment complexes or homes. I'm not sure which one they were, but it was magnificent. And then of course there was all that wonderful artwork that was on the buildings. The engravings that you saw, the sculpture pieces, the paintings on the wall. It was really wonderful. So with all that, I had a little bit of a difficulty deciding what I was going to do for the sketch. So after all that, I decided what would distinguish Salzburg from other places. And that, of course, is the view from the top of the castle looking down on the city, which of course incorporated all those wonderful churches, the river, the valley in the distance, the hills to the sides, and the cliff. So that's what I decided to do for my sketch. And this is the photograph, of course, of that. The next thing I did was to do a rough sketch of that photograph so that I had a good guide when I did my work on the canvas. I reduced that down, that little ink line rough sketch, put it on my overhead projector, transferred it to the canvas, and voila, I'm ready to start the sketch. So when you see this starting, you will again see those little ink lines that I did for the sketch, and then I went into the detail from then on. I hope you enjoy this process of doing the ink line sketch, and of course I will talk a little bit during my sketching time. This is the simple ink line parameters I put down already, rough sketch, so you can see where I'm going to be doing the detail work. Now I'm beginning with a very thick line because I want to emphasize the churches. That's the point of interest in what I would call the middle ground of this illustration, and there's going to be a lot of line work in here, but if I don't do this first with a real thick ink line, then it'll get lost. So I substantially, as you've seen in other vlogs, speeded this up so it doesn't take too much time to go through my showing you my progress on this illustration. Now the vanishing point for this illustration in the churches is down. It's like the center of the earth. That's why things seem to flare out as they come up towards the top. And the buildings on the right are leaning to the right. The buildings on the left are leaning to the left. And that has, of course, to do with the perspective. When I took this picture, I was on another, you might call, balcony of the castle up above, looking down. And I just really like the idea of the perspective, seeing that one balcony with the guardhouse in the middle, and it just gave it a really interesting look, a wonderful look. And with regards to the people in the foreground, those small people, I'm going to keep that as just simple line. I'm not going to be going into any detail on that. I want to keep it simple because I want the point of interest to be the churches in the middle ground. Now I'm putting in the foliage, the brush, and the little trees that were growing on that extremely steep cliff. And I'm going to use that to sort of frame the edge. And of course I'm using tape too, so as I give that rough effect. And by the way, I'm using the very edge of a dry marker, ink marker. That way I get that texture from the canvas, and it gives it more of a foliage or brush look. I'm doing the same on the other side. So this is going to sort of, with the darkness, it's going to frame the left and the right side of the illustration. Keep your eyes focused on the inside middle ground, and point of interest, again, the churches. I've already started some of the detail, as you can see, on the churches and the buildings in between. Most of them seem to be around 5 stories tall in terms of the apartments. I'm also not going to put a lot of detail on the roofs. I'm just going to keep them simple. They were a dark gray, but if I do too much line work in there, you got to decide where you're going to do line in a ink-line sketch. If you overdo it, then everything becomes mush with just too much line work. So in some places you just have to do nothing. In other places you do the detail, like in the towers. And again, you can see just my putting the details in towers, it really helped to have that strong line surrounding them to help it stand out. Otherwise they would get lost too. Now I'm putting that wonderful courtyard below near the tower. I'm going to be putting in the little people there way below, and that beautiful ball sculpture, that golden ball sculpture. That was amazing. Very beautiful. Now you may see me working with the mouse off to the right. What I do, and you don't see this right now as I'm doing the illustration, but I have that photo reference up on my screen. And what I want, sometimes as I'm working on the sketch, I want to get up close to a certain part of that photo reference so I can see the detail. And it's very helpful. It's a good trick to use. So I zoom in and zoom out. They help me. It's one of the wonderful things about the tools we have to work with today. Putting little cars in there, little people way down below. So now what I'm going to be doing on that guard tower in the castle is I'm going to make that dark, the walls dark, but I'm going to leave the roof on it light. Otherwise it might become a giant arrow in this picture. I don't want it to be an arrow that just points up to the sky. So I'm going to keep that light, like most of the steeple roofs on the churches. So I'm putting the rock in on the guard tower. And again, this is what I'm going to attempt to do, is use the guard tower and those walls that the people are coming up to as sort of again a frame, a dark frame to draw your interest to the actual churches. And again, I'm using a dry brush and tape to give it some shading. I'm going to lighten it out as I get towards the end. Don't want to be too dark. But that way it's going to work with the brushwork, the trees and shrubs to give it that edge. Sort of, again, a frame, a visual frame. And I did the other side too. Now I'm going to be going into the background, way out there, the wonderful valleys and small hills, mountains in the distance. And again, I'm using the edge of a dry felt tip pen, wide, just to give it, and I'm working with the texture of the canvas. A little harder where I want it to be more of a middle ground mountain. You can see in doing this why it was so important for me to at least put a rough line sketch in before I started doing the detail, because otherwise I'd get everything out of proportion. The edge of the river flowing through that beautiful city. Now what I'm doing is I'm going over to the left of the screen and I'm doing that middle ground mountain. And that's the middle ground mountain that had those really steep cliffs that came down to those apartments or buildings, the church and the monastery that you saw photographs of earlier. And so I'm gonna start putting in that cliff and the little homes right below it. It's just amazing how they built right up against the cliff. I guess I got ahead of myself there. doing little, there weren't little, again, the 5-story or 4-story buildings on the edge of the river on the east side of the riverbank. The bridge, pedestrian bridge is going over, there's a railroad bridge going over too. Looking at some of the buildings in the distance. That's more of the commercial center of Salzburg. Taller buildings, the main train stations about there where I'm illustrating now. I go back and forth in this illustration depending on what I feel needs to be done at the time. It's hard to explain why, but that's the way I work. Now I'm going back to the cliffs I was trying to explain before, putting the detail of the buildings in. There's a picture of it, the buildings right below the cliff. Now some more detail with regards to the old part of Salzburg. You can see what I meant earlier when I said there's a lot of detail in this illustration. Now, of course, I'm working on canvas, I'm working with the ink pen, and I'm getting texture that way. I'm not trying to get extremely accurate lines. I'm just trying to get an artistic impression of how I felt when I looked down on this city. And again, it was just beautiful. Now I'm just finishing up with a little darker lines in certain areas so that blends with the lighter lines. And that's about it. That's about the finished part of the illustration. After I'm done with doing the sketch, I like to show it again on the canvas. And one thing I think I mentioned while I was doing the sketch is the actual churches and the steeples on those churches or the domes over some of the cathedrals. I actually made them larger than the photograph showed, and the reason for that is I wanted to emphasize them in this sketch. I didn't do it a lot, but I did it a little. And that again is my artistic license to distinguish and to show this definitely as Salzburg. You see the river, you see the backgrounds, you see the cliffs over here to the left. All that is definitely Salzburg. It was fun to do this sketch because I remember the little adventures we have as we walked around the city in different areas, the things we saw, the people, the beauty. It was magnificent. So the next thing I'm going to be doing is the color rendition, and that is in the next vlog. So I hope you join me in that. Oh, and by the way, before I forget, if you're interested in investing in this original ink line sketch or any of the other art I have done on our Travel and Sketch adventures, please go, first of all, to my website, and there you'll see buttons for the store and also for going to my channel for YouTube. And in that case, you can share that with other people, both of them, in fact. So thanks again for joining me in this Travel and Sketch adventure, and have a great day.